Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Downtown New Jersey Conference. My name is Bob Zuckerman, and I am the president of Downtown New Jersey. We are very sad that obviously we couldn't get together this year. Actually, our conferences are normally in October, but we decided to go virtual this year for obvious reasons. And but we are so glad that all of you are with us. We're really excited about. We have an expanded program. It's all going to be live. There's lots of interesting networking opportunities for everybody here. We have a lot of things, great schedule, great events planned for the entire week. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at the whole schedule, you should. We also have a couple of networking sessions. We reached out and asked folks what they were looking for, and they said, we want more networking sessions. So we're giving them to you. And we also are having a virtual happy hour at the end of the conference later this week. So we're thrilled again that you're here. For those who don't know me, I kind of wear a whole number of hats in the downtown space. Yes, I'm the president of DNJ. And also my day job is that I'm an executive director of the Downtown Westfield Corporation, which is the nonprofit that runs Westfield Special Improvement District in downtown Westfield. Third, I am an elected member of the governing body in South Orange, where I live. I'm on the board of trustees there, where I chair the Planning and Economic Development Committee. And fourth, like some of you here, I am also a small business owner. I co-own a small business in downtown South Orange called Pet Wants, which is a natural pet food store. So I have my hand in lots of things regarding downtown, and I'm all about our downtowns here in the state. And that's why I'm so happy to be leading this conference for all of you here in attendance. Last year, obviously, was a very, very challenging year for all of us. Certainly, with the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's been a real tough go. But thankfully, we all had Downtown New Jersey to help us through these trying times. We held 17 downtown management forums on topics such as recovery marketing and safety protocols for retailers and for restaurateurs, and how COVID was going to affect the real estate market and survival marketing, shopping online, and all sorts of different very relevant informational topics that we brought to you quite frankly, quite frequently, several times a month, in fact. And they were all led by our fabulous executive director, Courtney Mercer. We also spoke at the APA panel, or at least I was on one of the panels talking about liquor license reform. And then at the end of last year, we had a town hall, in fact, on liquor license reform, where we kicked off the New Jersey Liquor License Reform Alliance. And we'll be talking to you more about that as the conference goes on. So we interface with government. We're on a lot of committees dealing with the governor's office. We met with legislators. We met with State Senate President Sweeney. We've been really in the thick of it. And if you haven't had the chance to participate in many of our programs in 2020, it's never too late. 2021 is here. Things are going to get better this year, and we're going to keep informing you, our public. So with that said, I think it's time to start the program. I've been a member of Downtown New Jersey, board member, for a number of years now, and we've never had the participation at any of our conferences of the governor, but that's about to change, because Governor Murphy actually pre-recorded. He's very busy with the COVID-19 crisis, but he was happy to pre-record a greeting for us, where he's going to talk about some of the initiatives that he and the legislature have worked on recently and that have just introduced to help our small businesses and help our small business districts move into the future. And while obviously not everything went perfectly, but I have to say that Governor Murphy really had the interests of our small businesses at heart during the entire time. And if you've seen any of his press conferences, safety first, and then economy, and he's been very, very consistent about that. That if we can get this COVID-19 pandemic behind us, we can really open up the economy in ways that we never have before. So with that being said, I'm now going to introduce for all of you, Governor Phil Murphy.
Governor Phil Murphy here to welcome you to this year's Downtown New Jersey Conference. So as we begin a new year, I know we are all looking to the future and eagerly awaiting an end to the incredible challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. You've heard me say that public health creates economic health. Our commitment to this ideal is unwavering, as it needs to be. In the face of the pandemic, our economic focus has been on supporting our hard-hit small businesses and encouraging new ones to grow right here in New Jersey. Through the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, nearly 55,000 small businesses, many of them, by the way, owned by women, people of color, and veterans, have received a life-saving grant or a loan. And some of our nascent startups have received guarantees for vital new capital. These proactive steps have allowed struggling businesses to keep their lights on and their employees on the payroll. I could not be prouder of the way our communities have come together to support their local businesses, as well as the dedication and creativity of our incredible small business owners. This is why I'm so excited about the prospects of our new business incentive program. So we have enacted sweeping reforms to ensure that our incentives program is transparent and fair, and focuses not just on huge corporations, but on job-creating small businesses and innovative startups. Notably, the new proposed incentives package includes a Main Street Recovery Finance program. In its first year, this program will feature $25 million for grants and loans to small businesses and micro businesses with 10 or fewer employees and annual revenues of less than $1 million. And to further support New Jersey's small business community, toward the end of January, the New Jersey Economic Development Authority will launch the second phase of its $10 million COVID Emergency Assistance Loan Program for small businesses. It will offer loans of up to $100,000 in low-cost financing to eligible New Jersey small businesses and nonprofits to help the recovery and reopening efforts as a result of COVID-19. The funding can be used to pay rent or a mortgage or pay payroll and or your utilities. It can also be used to purchase inventory or personal protective equipment, or to buy furniture, fixtures, or other equipment. To ensure equity, $3.5 million of the funding will be reserved for businesses in Opportunity Zone eligible census tracts. Every one of these initiatives recognizes the same single truth, that our small businesses are the backbone of our economy and of our communities. There is no denying that we are facing a tough time. But as we begin this new year and we look to the future, I am confident that together we will bounce back stronger than ever before. Thanks to each and every one of you. Happy New Year to you all, and God bless each and every one of you.
And thank you, Governor Murphy, for addressing us. As I said before I introduced the governor and his recorded message, he and the legislature have worked out an exciting new package of grants and loans that a lot of our small businesses can tap into. So we look forward to hearing more about the regulations on that, and the grant loan mix and what have you. But thank you, Governor Murphy, for being here virtually. I'm soon going to hand it off to our sponsor for this session, Commercial District Services. We'll tell you a little bit about their work, and then they're going to introduce our keynote speaker for today. But just a little bit of housekeeping first. If you have questions during the session, please put them in the chat box and make sure that you have to everyone so that we can all see it. We'll be monitoring the questions during the talk, and then sort of the most interesting, most relevant questions we'll forward over to Charles, our keynote speaker, so he can answer them. I do want to, before we turn it over to Chris at CDS, I want to thank all the sponsors here this morning and this week for sponsoring this conference. We couldn't have pulled this conference together without all of you. Your generosity definitely makes this event possible. And you could check them all out at our virtual exhibit hall. So, you don't have to walk around. You can kind of just, take your mouse and go around the screen at our virtual exhibit hall website, which is the URL is dnjconference.com/exhibit-hall. Courtney will put that in the chat so that everyone has that URL. And we also in particular want to thank our tech sponsor, Gensler, for helping think us through and how we could readapt this conference to make it virtual. So thank you, Jonathan, and thank you everyone at Gensler. So now I do want to about to turn it over to our title sponsor, Commercial District Services. I had the opportunity to work with their firm over a course of a number of years when I was director in South Orange, and they've been a great supporter of DNJ throughout. And I'm just really thankful to Chris and his team for their support of our organization and for everything that they do to make our downtowns better. So without further ado, to introduce our keynote speaker today, I will turn it over to the principal and owner of Commercial District Services and founder, Chris Bernardo.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Bernardo, the president of Commercial District Services. We are a business improvement district management firm and outdoor services firm based in Jersey City. I have to tell you, it is a real pleasure to be the title sponsor for this year's conference. Boy, how important has downtown New Jersey been to all of us that have had to manage through what was a really unpredictable and crazy 2020. I have to really thank our leadership, our president, Bob Zuckerman, our executive director, Courtney Mercer, who just really met the moment, getting out in front of all of these issues very early on and providing some really critical information, having some important conversations with state and local officials early on, and really helping to lead us through this. We're not through it yet. We're all working together to try and make this a successful transition to a new normal. But boy, what a real value and a real good partner downtown New Jersey has been to all of us. So we thank you for that. We'll be doing some more speaking in our session, our networking session later on at 12:50. So we're looking forward to seeing everybody there. But I do have the great honor of introducing our 2021 New Jersey Downtown Conference speaker, Charles Marohn. Charles is the founder and president of Strong Towns and is the author of Strong Towns, a bottom-up revolution to rebuilding American prosperity. He hosts the Strong Town podcast and is a primary writer on the website. He has presented Strong Towns concepts in hundreds of cities and towns across North America. He is featured in a documentary, Owned, A Tale of Two Americas, and was named one of the 10 most influential urbanists of all time in Planet Zine. Today, Charles will talk to us about the Local Leaders Toolkit, a Strong Towns response to the pandemic, which obviously is very timely, and we're really looking forward to that. So, Charles, if you're ready, please, it's great to see you. Great to have you here. Please take it away.
Thanks, Chris. It's nice to see you and nice to chat with you again. You and I have had some good conversations that I'm really honored to be here as well. Also, just a quick shout out to East Orange. I was on a book tour back in 2019, and the good people of East Orange invited me to come there and speak, and turned out in big amounts, and were very generous with their time and their space. And I just wanted to especially give a thank you to them. I spent a summer at Fort Dix, New Jersey, way back in the 1990s. And so I have this kind of view of New Jersey that's been corrected over time by a number of kind people. So thank you. We have a lot of work to do. And I think you're going to find my presentation lies somewhere between, or my thoughts or the Strong Towns movement itself lies somewhere between, I think the general optimism of a downtown group, which, tends to be very rosy-eyed, and I understand that. I appreciate that. Somewhere between that and a pessimism. The sky is falling. It's kind of our worst instincts on some days where things seem like they're not working. We believe in downtowns, clearly. We believe in that, a strong towns approach is one that is based on strong neighborhoods, strong core downtowns surrounded by and integrated with an ecosystem. And so what you're going to hear from us, and not just here today, but throughout all of the work that we do at Strong Towns, is that the downtown is a starting point. The downtown is essentially the base, the bedrock, the core economic structure on which we build strong and prosperous communities. Just real briefly, our mission at Strong Towns is to support a model of development that allows our cities, towns, and neighborhoods to become financially strong and resilient. I've spent over a decade here now talking about how our development pattern post-World War II has made our cities financially fragile. When the pandemic started, we looked at the fragility of our local communities, the fragility of our cities, the fragility of our economy, and recognized right away that this is going to hit the downtown, the core businesses. This is going to really hit people in a big way, very hard. We started to field questions immediately about how do we respond. And in those early days of the pandemic, we sat down and said, okay, how do we help people transition to something that is more stable, something that is more prosperous, something that they, in a sense, own and can control their futures? Out of that came this community toolkit. I'm going to go through aspects of it with you today. And then at the end, I'll give you the URL so you can get your own copy of it. This is a free tool that we put together at Strong Towns for local leaders. Let me start with this idea of a local leader. And I've not gotten in trouble for this. I thought this would be one of the things that people would get mad at me about with this thing, but people have been pretty accepting. Yeah, like, okay, we get it. This distinction between leaders and managers. And I think I've been not in trouble because I've been very clear that we need managers. There are lots of times when we need very competent people to implement visions, to take something and just put it to work. But there are other times, and this is one of those times, where we really need local leaders. We really need leadership. We need people to fill a leadership role. Leaders have followers. Managers have subordinates. Leaders know how to responsibly break rules. This is a time where we need new rules. We need to push, outside the lines. Managers tend to administer guidelines. Leaders encourage risk-taking. Managers tend to play it safe. Leaders are out there selling a vision. This is what things can be like if we just, ABC. Managers tend to sell projects, means to an end, as opposed to the end in itself. Leaders will see opportunities, and certainly in front of us are lots of challenges, but also lots of opportunities when leaders can see them. Managers see the potential failures. We need good managers. Managers are very important to managing our day-to-day activities. We rely on them, we need them. But there are times when in our communities, we need to make room for leadership. We need to make room for leaders. We need to be the group that embraces responsibly breaking rules, responsible risk-taking, a vision for how we can transform things anew despite the struggle, and to see the opportunities that present themselves. I encourage you all to start by taking those people in your communities that are leaders and giving them the room to really lead the way here. We have organized this toolkit into 3 parts. There's an immediate response part, there's a midterm response part, and there's a long-term response. As we go through these parts, I hope you see in the immediate part that you've done a lot of these things, that a lot of these things are up. If you haven't, now's the time to get started. As we transition then to a midterm and a long-term approach, what we really are trying to do here is walk you through a change in mindset, a change in approach, one that will make you less fragile, one that will make you stronger and more prosperous over time. Each of these sections has a shift in thinking as well as action steps. So let's start with that immediate shift in thinking. If we remember back to the early days of the pandemic, there was this kind of general fear. What would this mean? What would this mean immediately for us as the economy was tanking, as things were being locked down? Were we going to make it through the next month? Were we going to make it through the next 2 months? On this sheet, I want to emphasize a couple of things. And one, this is the leadership aspect of this again, the idea that we really are in a time where we need new thinking, we need new ideas, we need people to step up. But then I really want to dwell on the second point here, the idea of orienting horizontally, not vertically. A big part of our post-World War II development pattern, the pattern that has made our cities very fragile, is been this orientation of not only local government, but of society in general, vertically. If you are with a local governments tend to orient around the programs coming from the state and federal government. They tend to orient around the money that is coming from Wall Street or other top-down sources. What this has done is left a lot of things on the table. By orienting horizontally, in that orientation, so that we're not obsessed about the vertical flows of capital, but are more obsessed about the real struggles, the real experiences, the real difficulties being had within our communities. What we can identify are a lot of the low-hanging fruit, a lot of the urgencies, a lot of the things where a tiny bit of effort can make a huge amount of progress. This is a theme that I'm going to come back to over and over again, this idea of orienting horizontally. But everything from, and I like to encapsulate this by saying, I don't know as now is the time we should have a grant writer on staff. We really need people who are going to be more out in the neighborhoods, out in the communities, serving people, addressing their needs, which is much easier and much more fruitful than seeking that program that is set up from a higher level of government. Let's also emphasize the idea of being a voice of unity and seizing the moment. Those things are going to come into play here in a bit. So how do we respond? We need to make sure that people are getting fed. We need to make sure that people are getting shelter. I hope your communities have addressed these things at this point. These are kind of in a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the most important things. I will say from my time in some of the communities in New Jersey, this is an ongoing problem even before the pandemic. It's an ongoing problem now, and it's one that there have been a lot of creative solutions to in the months since March and April of this year, when this became not a chronic issue, but an acute issue. We need to support the public health response. And with that, I put a little note in here on connecting mass to economic recovery. Very, very early on, and I would say even earlier than people were still debating the merits of masks and mask wearing in decent circles back in last February and March. We were talking about the need to connect whatever the public health response to the idea of getting our local economies moving again. As we've seen now, and as we continue to experience, there's a lot that has broken down here along the kind of typical political lines or social demographic lines of division that we become used to. I think we need to try to reset our conversation around the local community, around getting our community back to work. When I've been able to talk to mayors and been able to talk to local leaders, I've always said, don't talk about mass, don't talk about the public health response, don't talk about any of these things in terms of public health, saving lives, saving people. I get all that, and everybody else gets that too. What we need to talk about is we need to frame these things in terms of getting back to normal as soon as possible, getting our economy moving as quickly as possible, getting people jobs, getting their businesses going, getting basically our local economic ecosystem back up on its feet and moving ahead. When we talk about these things and we get distracted by all the other kind of side arguments that are going on, we allow our narrative to be kind of co-opted by forces beyond our control. When we can focus our narrative on our neighbor and their job, our neighbor and their mortgage, our neighbor and their small business, we can say, you know what? I realize this isn't necessarily the best thing. I realize this isn't maybe what you want to do, but this is what needs to be done for each other. This is what needs to be done for our community. And that's something that people of all political persuasions, of all views can mostly get behind. To connect to that and to build off of that, we need to provide people with space. I have this sense, and I don't know New Jersey as well as I would like to in this regard, largely because we've been locked down and my ability to travel and get out has been very limited. But a lot of the reports I get, particularly from the east, northeast of this country and from the West Coast, is that on these first two things, providing people space and going easy on enforcement, we've had some struggles. There's been some difficulty in understanding that part of this crisis is also a mental health crisis. Part of this crisis requires that people be able to get out of their homes, get out of their space. Humans are social creatures. We do need interaction with other people. How do we do that in space that is as accessible as possible and also as safe as possible? Providing people room in parks, on streets, to get out, to use that space, to stay social distance, but to be able to be social. And then to use our enforcement approach, not as a hammer, but as an educational tool. Again, going back to the idea of we're all in this together. We all need to work together. Let's sacrifice and do this for your neighbor, for the person up the street, for your community. When it comes to small businesses, when it comes to the downtown, we need to have an active approach to supporting adaptation. All that red tape, all that bureaucracy, all that permitting, we need to somehow be able to lay off of that, lift up and say, you know what, we're going to provide our small businesses, we're going to provide our local neighborhoods, we're going to provide our entrepreneurs with as much room as they can to adapt and experiment. Because quite frankly, we don't know where this is going to end up. We don't know the best approaches. As optimistic as we might be about 2021, we don't know how it's going to go. There could be a second wave. There could be a second wave that's even bigger. There could be all kinds of economic fallout from this that's difficult to predict. What we do know is that the most innovative people in our communities are our small businesses. There are downtowns, there are entrepreneurs, and we need to give them the room to experiment, the room to adapt, the room to figure out a path forward. As local governments, there's a lot of things that we used to do that we are no longer doing. There's a lot of capacity that we have that is no longer needed to do the things that it's doing. We suggest that one of the best things that cities can do is collect data. Right now, I tell city halls, you should be on the phone talking to your small businesses. You should be talking to your downtowns, and you should be asking them, what do you need? Where is your struggle? Where's the difficulty that you're having? If I'm a local leader, I want to know all of this stuff firsthand. And then finally, we recommend to local communities to preserve your cash. This is going to run a little bit counter to some of the top-down advice that we're getting. Some of the incentive programs that we have in place to borrow money, to spend money. I get those. And from a macro perspective, I understand why that is important for our economy. But we're talking about the unknown, an unknown future. It's very important to have options, and cash provides us some options. I think that's particularly important when we look at our core businesses in the downtown. And this is, as I was thinking about this presentation, I left this slide in, even knowing that this would probably be the most difficult part of this conversation. Very early in the pandemic, and even now today, we have been recommending to local governments not to merely throw cash at your small business community. There were a number of places that we saw as early as April and May that were giving money to local businesses to try to help them bridge the gap, to try to help them stay open, to try to help them make payroll or make rent or what have you. Let me just say off the bat, I get that urge. And I empathize with the idea that if we have the capacity to help, we should help. I get that. And I think, you know, here in my local community in central Minnesota, some of the most inspiring things have been where, you know, people have committed and recommitted to supporting local business, going out of their way to buy their things there, to be part of those ecosystems. You know, we as a family have chosen to, you know, eat out once a week from a local business that they're closed, go in, get our food, bring it home, do that stuff. A lot of my neighbors have done similarly to keep places open and keep them running. This is wonderful. But when we look at the trade-off of local government and local governmental systems, non-governmental organizations and the like, the idea of just throwing money indiscriminately at businesses, just handing out money, is a very difficult one because, first of all, those entities are fragile in and of themselves. We know our cities have trouble collecting the garbage, maintaining the streets, doing the base core things that they're supposed to do. The other part of it that makes it problematic is we really don't know what the future is going to bring. We don't know if this is going to be another 12 months, another 6 months, another 3 months, another 2 years. We need our local governments. We need our NGOs. We need these places to be there doing what they do. We also need our businesses to be able to adapt and change. The combination of those two things is really important to our future. By just shoveling money from one entity to the other, we arrest both of those in ways that I think are going to hurt us in the future. Once we get through that initial phase, once we start to say, all right, we don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know where we're going to be in the future, but we are still in the midst of it. We're still in this period of transition. There's some shifts in thinking that I think are really helpful here too. First is that recovery is not going to mean restoration. Part of the vision, I think, that a lot of us want to cling to, or is very comforting to have sold to us, is this idea that we will get back to, and I used the phrase already, and Chris used this phrase when he was introducing me, you know, get back to some semblance of normalcy. What is normal? And I think it's important for us to recognize that in many fundamental ways, recovery is not going to mean a restoration. It's not going to mean a restoration to, you know, really, if we step back and look, was a decade or more since the housing crisis of economic malaise, of slow growth, of you know, difficulty in getting through. We need to restore to something else. We actually, in this transition, are kind of being forced to rethink our economy, rethink our local economic ecosystems. And I think we need to allow ourselves to move beyond the idea that recovery is going to mean a restoration of the past. Hopefully it will mean something better. It will certainly mean something different. We need to, at the local level, work towards self-sufficiency, fully knowing that we're not going to get all the way there. We're not going to, in most of our communities, build our own iPods, build our own iPhones. We're not going to, you know, put together our own automobiles, but there are many, many things we can do to create our own self-sufficiency, to lessen our fragility, and to enhance our local economic ecosystems so that they're stronger and more prosperous. And then finally, the shift in thinking that we think is so important at this phase is that we need to realize that there's a trade-off between growth and stability. There's, particularly at the local level, it is very easy for us to grow. It is very easy for us to experience growth, the kind of growth that is measured in GDP and unemployment statistics. It is very easy for us to experience that if we are willing to sacrifice our financial health tomorrow. Small businesses know and understand this. I think local communities, this is a more difficult situation. If we are willing to borrow large amounts of money, we can grow today. We'll just have difficulty in the days after that. These are trade-offs that we're being encouraged to make for a lot of pragmatic reasons that national politicians and statewide politicians and economic analysis worry about. I get that. I understand that. I also think that we need to, as local communities, understand these trade-offs very clearly. So how do we respond? There's some very practical and pragmatic things we can do right now at the local level to create that room for adaptation, that room for entrepreneurs and small businesses to figure things out. The first thing is, if you still have home occupation restrictions, with many communities do, get rid of those. Like let's take this opportunity to wipe those out. We all woke up in mid-March and realized that we live in mixed-use neighborhoods. We live in neighborhoods where people were doing business and conducting commerce from their homes. And we tend to regulate these things in ways that are unhealthy. I think planners generally recognize this. I think policymakers generally recognize this. Right now we have a situation where huge numbers of our residents are breaking our home occupation rules. Let's not enforce them. Let's get rid of them. It's time to move on. Along with this, we can legalize some essential neighborhood services. One of the things that we have recognized in this pandemic is that the idea of American development patterns, where we bring people from all over to centralized, concentrated places, is one of the most tenuous things for responding to a pandemic. It goes back to the old engineering adage: dilution is the solution to pollution. Dilution is also the solution to viral spreading, right? We want to get people spread out. We want them to be able to access their essential services closer to home. We don't want to force them all to go to the same big box store or all go to the same commercial place, despite how efficient that might be for the macro economy. We can create a lot of room for innovation and a lot of room for people to respond to the needs of our neighborhoods, the needs of people who are struggling, by legalizing the essential services in a neighborhood. There is no reason why a neighborhood adjacent to the downtown could not support accountants, attorneys, a pharmacy, corner medical professionals, people doing haircuts, bodegas, people selling milk and bread. These are all things that people need. And the more we can allow them to meet their needs within close proximity of their home, not only are we creating a more vibrant economic ecosystem, but we're actually helping in terms of the pandemic. Along with this, kickstarting entrepreneurs, there's a big difference. And I gave a talk a while back, you could look it up online, called The Difference Between an Investor and an Entrepreneur. Our macroeconomy tends to favor investors. And we've seen wide divergence between the measurements of investor success, the stock market, et cetera, and entrepreneurial success, small business startup, small business success. There's a huge difference between the two. We need to kickstart entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, at the end of the day, are crazy people who don't know they can fail. We need to make it a little bit easier for them to get started, to lower their burden. This slide is a slide of some storage sheds in a little city called Muskegon, Michigan. Muskegon had a downtown that was struggling. They recognized that one of the problems they had was they had a very high burden for entrepreneurs coming in. Entrepreneurs coming into these buildings that had high vacancies needed to put in, sprinkler systems, ADA compliant bathrooms, needed to make a whole bunch of improvements. Important things, not arguing that these things aren't important, but to start up your business, you were going to have to spend 6 figures, sometimes 7 figures, to get a building up and working. What they said is, let's lower the bar of entry. And so they went out and installed these storage sheds. They painted them up. They filled in a little gap in their streetscape to make it look nice. And they rent them out very, very cheap to startup entrepreneurs, to these crazy people who don't know that they can fail. Who are these entrepreneurs? They're people who are trying to find a way to be of service to others in the community and make a living doing it. And so what they've done is they lowered the bar of entry. They made it very easy for people to come in and try out their business idea with very little downside risk, that if it failed, it was going to ruin their life. as a result of this, not only are these places always full of new people, full of new ideas, full of energy, but their core downtown is also full too. And a lot of the people that have filled those vacant spaces are people who were able to get proof of concept here and move on to the core downtown. We need to legalize housing adaptation. If you go into your local code today, a lot of things that are going on right now in terms of allowing accessory apartments, allowing people to rent out space within their own home, convert their garages into not only businesses, but places for people to live. A lot of these things are illegal, but they're happening right now. And they're happening right now because this is how we're going to keep people in their homes. We have had a period of time now where people were not required to pay their mortgage because they couldn't, but we're entering into a period where that is going to change, and people are going to have to start making payments, and they're going to have a very difficult time doing this. At the same time, we have a lot of people who have lost their homes, who have been unable to pay rent, who have been unable to afford housing at the prices that it is at now. And so by combining those two things, if we allow people to make better use of their space, to take that 4-bedroom house and convert it into 2-bedroom homes, to take that garage they have in back and convert it into an accessory apartment, what we can do is we allow people additional revenue so that they can make their mortgage, so that they can stay in their home. And at the same time, we allow people who need housing, who need affordable housing, to find new places to live that would be, both safe and also healthy for them. We could solve these two things at the same time, or at least go a long ways towards making them better if we legalize these adaptations. We need to make quick and lean investments in biking and walking. What we have found in the pandemic is that a lot of the infrastructure we built for automobiles is not being utilized, and not being utilized the way that we envisioned it, and also would be better used for people to give them space and allow them to get outside and have their mental health tended to. We need to take this opportunity to make some of those investments now. We don't have to do that permanently. We can use straw bales and paint and cones, but taking space from vehicles and allowing it to be used by people who bike and walk is a very important strategy in multiple ways. We've also seen reports now that auto fatalities in 2020 were its highest level in many, many years, despite the traffic amounts being down dramatically. That's because our streets are vastly over-engineered. And when we take away the congestion that tends to calm traffic, what we get is we get a lot of fast speeding cars. We need to take that space back and use it more productively. And parking requirements. If we have been on this crusade for over a decade now, parking is not only the most one of the most expensive things that we provide, but it's also the least productive thing that we provide. If we look at our tax base, there's a strong correlation between cities that are successful financially, cities that are financially productive and stable, and cities that have less parking. The more parking you have, the more you're going to struggle. I realize from a downtown business standpoint, this is a very difficult thing, but we need to start talking about how we have more destinations in our downtown and how we create economic ecosystems around those places so that our market is essentially built into our place, not something that we are regularly importing. Along those lines of self-resiliency and self-sufficiency, the kind of exhibit A is the idea that we can grow our own food. There's a lot of great stuff happening along these lines in New Jersey and in New England that we don't see in other parts of the country. It's fascinating to me that, I live in a small town surrounded by farms, yet to get a local prepared meal or a meal of local food is a really difficult thing. If you go to the Northeast, it's much more common. I think we need to continue to go down that route. Local food is kind of the first way that we can create some self-sufficiency. And not only that, but we can actually create, because we have this trade-off now with transportation costs, that's very real. We can actually allow people to have farms and make a really good living while we pay less or comparable amounts for the food they grow. And the end result is that we eat better food. We eat food that tastes better, and that's better for us. This is one of those areas of self-sufficiency that if we lean into it and are pioneers, it can start to have spin-off effects in other places. We need to thicken our civic infrastructure. One of the kind of markers or hallmarks of communities that have had an easier time, I'll say, of the pandemic is a thick civic infrastructure. When we go back to the last section, get people food, get people shelter, the places that were able to do that the quickest are places that had churches, synagogues, mosques, places that had active Rotary clubs, active Lions clubs, active civic organizations out there doing that work. These are things that no local government system, no state and federal system can really fully replace. We need to, let me put it this way. I recognize that there's a separation of church and state that's very important. And I'm not suggesting that we, violate that in any way. But when we look at our civic infrastructure, both religious and secular, that large net of people working together cooperatively in across neighborhoods, across downtowns, throughout the community, is really, I think, the marker or the indicator of your capacity to recover from hardship, your capacity to overcome difficult times, your capacity to see your way forward. We need to allow this civic infrastructure to thicken up. And we need to, as local communities, really, really support its deployment. We need to reorient our bureaucracies. Again, this gets back to that vertical versus horizontal orientation. I used the idea of a grants writer earlier, and I'll go back to that one. The idea that we have someone sitting at City Hall who's looking and saying, what grant can we apply for? What program is there? Is not nearly as valuable as having that same person say, where are the people in our community struggling? Where's the difficulty that they're having? What's the thing that we can do right now that would be small, but would help them alleviate that struggle? When we see communities reorient themselves in that way to focus on the core needs of their people, the core needs of their businesses, they can do amazing things. I'll give a small little anecdote here. In my hometown, and we've abandoned this now for good reason, but this summer, our local government obsession was about building a children's museum. We had all these meetings, all these conversations, this search committee to find the right land, all this stuff about building a children's museum. Children's museums would be great. I would love a children's museum. I can see a lot of families that would benefit from a children's museum. But in the midst of this pandemic, why were we obsessed over a children's museum? Why was that the thing that was, we're having special meetings about and chatting about? It's very clear, because the state of Minnesota has a program that funds children's museums. And, we had applied for a grant and gotten preliminary approval. And so all of a sudden, all the other things that were important in our community were kind of crowded out or shoved to the side, because this was the thing that our vertically oriented bureaucracy was emphasizing. Fortunately, we've been able to a degree, reorient our bureaucracy to be more horizontal, to focus on the urgent needs of people here. And what we've discovered is that there's a lot more things more pressing for us than applying for a grant for a children's museum. And then finally, change how you measure success. We have been accustomed to, at the local level, measuring success in the ways that state and federal governments tend to measure success, even though we have way different economies and way different needs. Things like growth. How many new permits did we issue this year? How many new businesses opened this year? How many new miles of road did we build? How many new miles of pipe did we build? These are measurements of transactions, and transactions at the local level tell you very little about how much wealth you have produced. We all know, those who run small businesses grasp that you can do a whole bunch of transactions, but if you don't make money off of any of them, or if you're losing on all of them, the number of transactions is not a very impressive number. What's more important is how much wealth are you building? How much stability are you creating? How strong and prosperous is your place becoming? In the toolkit, I provide a link to Pensacola, Florida, which has done a really great job creating a dashboard metrics of community health. Things like, readiness for kindergarten, high school graduations, They have, a whole dashboard of things that they're tracking every year. And not only tracking them and looking at these measurements of community health, but asking a subsequent follow-up question when they're falling short is, how do we improve this? And it's led to some really, really innovative approaches. Finally, in this section, we have to start preparing for federal and state assistance. And I put assistance in air quotes here. I remember back to 2009 when we had the infrastructure stimulus bill that came out there as an assistance to local government. And this was a bill that emphasized shovel-ready projects. And I think in theory, if you're an economist, that makes a lot of sense. You're trying to get money out the door as quickly as possible. You're trying to get it to work as quickly as possible. Where are those shovel-ready projects? Those projects where the plans are done, the designs are done, and they're just sitting there on the shelf waiting to go. That may be the quickest way to get this money out into the economy. For local governments and for local communities, this is the exact opposite of what we need. When we look at the idea of a shovel-ready project, this is a project that we work through our entire system and bureaucracy, got to the point where we were ready to make a decision on doing it. And we said, you know what? We really can't justify this. This is not a very good project. And so it got put up on a shelf. It got set aside for very good reasons. 2009, we took all those bad projects off the shelf and we did them in mass. And we've seen cities suffer the consequences from that ever since. This time, we need to actually be ready for this money. If we're going to have, federal infrastructure dollars rain down on us, if we're going to have state infrastructure dollars rain down on us, we should be prepared to accept that money in a way that is going to be most productive and most helpful for our communities. There's no way to do this perfectly. There's no way to not make any mistakes and make this work. As a general rule, though, we've created some criteria that will help you pick projects that are better than others. First of all, if you can prioritize the money for maintenance over new capacity, you will be doing your balance sheet a world of service. You'll be fixing something that was going to come due, reducing your near-term costs, and without adding additional capacity that's going to create long-term headaches for you. If we can prioritize below ground infrastructure over above ground, what we find is that that below ground infrastructure is more difficult for us as local communities to find the money to fix. It also lasts longer, so the return on that investment is going to be greater for you. And then if you can prioritize neighborhoods that are more than 75 years old over neighborhoods that are newer for this investment, what we find is that those older neighborhoods tend to be more dynamic in terms of their upward their upward productivity capacity, their capacity for growth, their capacity for expansion, their ability to thicken up and to adapt and change and be flexible. These neighborhoods are designed with a pattern and an approach that allows them to really capture the upside of that type of investment. So if you're going out and you're going to receive money and you're going to spend it within your community, if you can prioritize maintenance of stuff that's below ground in older neighborhoods, you're going to run the chance of having a project that financially is going to turn out better for you than anything else you could do. Finally, now, we're talking long-term, and this really gets to the core set of Strong Towns insights and messages. How do we shift our thinking? How do we position our community so that we can become a strong town, so that we can become a strong place, so that we can increase our financial productivity and become more prosperous, broadly speaking, over time? So these are core Strong Towns ideals and insights. At Strong Towns, we rely on little bets, not on transformative projects. Our post-World War II economy has been a series of kind of silver bullet transformative projects that were meant to change everything. And what we find now today is that the best projects we can make are these incremental ones, these small ones, these ones that are thickening up our neighborhoods, that are little bets. We can go in and take care of things and make them incrementally better. We see huge returns from those types of investments. We favor investments that emphasize resiliency, not simple efficiency. Efficiency is the buzzword of our economy, and whenever we talk about making investments, is this efficient? Is this an efficient way to do things? We recognize now in this pandemic that there's a big gap in resiliency, our ability to bounce back, our ability to overcome, our ability to be strong and prosperous even in difficult times. We need to emphasize this. We do that partially by designing things to adapt to feedback. A big part of our economic approach is overcoming pain, overcoming feedback, overcoming difficulty. As small businesses, we understand that feedback is the thing that drives our innovation. When we try to do something new and people don't pick it up, we get immediate feedback that that's not working and we have to try something differently. We need to create that type of feedback loop throughout local government, throughout our systems, throughout our community, so that our communities are adapting to that feedback in real time. Getting back to that way we orient horizontally as opposed to vertically, we need to use bottom-up action to drive our steps, our next steps, our next investments, our next thing that we focus on and do, not our top-down systems. So many times we get comfortable with a system or a systematic approach to doing things. If you've ever heard someone say, well, this is the way it's done, or this is the way it's always been done, you're dealing with a historic system. By focusing on the urgent needs of people in our communities, by focusing on the day-to-day struggles that people have, we can actually create bottom-up action and a lot of momentum for some great things that will be very real and very pragmatic in helping people. Conduct as much of life as possible at a personal scale. This gets really to the feedback and the bottom-up systems. How do we scale our responses and scale the things we do to humans? One of the things that I really like about Chris Bernardo and the work that he does is the idea that it is focusing on humans, it's focusing on people, it's focusing on how they exist in a space and what their needs are. These are the types of responses we need. And then our mantra at Strong Towns is always do the math. We need to be rigorously in government, out of government, doing the math on our return on investment. We need to be carefully tracking our balance sheet to make sure that when we're taking on long-term obligations, those are offset by a real increase in our tax flow, our tax base, the way we manage our community. We need to become much more rigorous and much less whimsical about the actual financial mathematics of running our communities. So for a response, not only focus on our downtown, but focus on an ecosystems of neighborhoods around our downtown. I talked about parking earlier on and our need to decrease parking. As we decrease parking, we need to increase neighborhood. Neighborhood is the fundamental building block of our downtowns, of our core communities, and we need to lean into that. We need to focus on neighborhood compatibility and not simply use. From a regulatory standpoint, we tend to treat things in a very kind of suburban way, even within our downtown. This is a restaurant. This is a coffee shop. This is a accountant's office. And we treat those with vastly different rules and regulations, as opposed to this is a building in a neighborhood that has people coming in and out. How is it a good neighbor? How is it compatible with the things around it? The more we can shift our regulatory approach to away from use and on neighborhood compatibility, the more flexibility we will give to people to adapt and to use the space and make good use of their neighborhood. We need to focus on expanding those housing opportunities. The idea of allowing people more use to intensify their own building, to provide things for their neighbors so that they can live within the neighborhood so people can continue to make their mortgage. We focus on transportations as a means, not as an end. This is kind of a pithy statement, but it goes to this idea that, again, when we orient vertically, what we find is that a lot of the capital flowing into our communities comes through transportation funding. The federal government, the state government comes to us with transportation dollars. What that has the effect of doing is we tend to then look at all of our problems as transportation problems with transportation solutions. Transportation is very important for our communities, but it is a means, it is not an end. And we really need to start with an understanding of, again, the bottom-up notion of where people struggle. Focus on economic development with a gardening mentality. I don't think I need to say this, to all of you in the downtown group, but if we took 50 businesses and added one job to each, that was such a better approach than trying to find the one business that creates 50 jobs that we can, pay or subsidize to move into our community. The idea of gardening, of growing our own, of continually adapting and expanding our economic base is so important to building a strong town. We need to leverage our public spaces. Those public spaces, whether they're the streets, the sidewalks, the parks, or whatever other public space we have, those things need to magnify our wealth, grow our capacity. We always tell people, if you're building a park with a parking lot, you're doing it wrong. The park should actually be an amenity for all the land around it in a very physical sense, radiating wealth to the community. The more we can leverage those investments, the better off we're going to be. Focus on our people, of course, their urgent needs, their struggles, and then focus on reducing our debts and liabilities. Again, having cash, reducing debts, lowering our liabilities buys us options. And in an uncertain future, in an uncertain economy, we benefit from having more options rather than less. A couple things here at the end, some resources. We launched this year something called the Strong Towns Action Lab. This is a place for people who are looking to do things in their community to make it stronger. You can get that information at actionlab.strongtowns.org, series of how-to guides and checklists and different things that you can undertake to make your place stronger. We also have the Strong Towns Academy, where we have a free online course, Strong Towns 101, a bunch of other courses that are there as well. You can get that at academy.strongtowns.org. Those are designed to help you understand how your place can become stronger and more successful. And then, of course, the toolkit that we've been discussing today is available online at strongtowns.org/toolkit. I welcome you to not only download it and adapt it and use it on your own, but also join in this broader conversation that we're having across the United States and really across all of North America in how do we take this challenging period of time we have and use it not to kind of restore what once was, but to really create a robust bottom-up revolution, a system of economic ecosystems focused around our downtown and the surrounding neighborhoods that will allow our cities to be strong, to be prosperous, to be flexible, adaptable, and to really serve us as local communities in achieving a long-term prosperity. So with that, I am going to pause. I know that Courtney has some questions for me from you. I am looking forward to that. And again, and just really grateful that all of you have invited me here to be part of this today. Thanks, Courtney.
Great. Thank you. What a wonderful talk. And I'm going through, of course, everybody's putting them in right at the last minute. So I'm quickly reading them. But I'll jump to one that I got early on. How can managers shift to be leaders within their projects? And can leaders sometimes shift temporarily to be followers?
That's a great set of questions. I think a leadership mentality, there's some ideas that, a leadership mentality is something that you're born with. And I don't necessarily believe that. I think there are different leaders for different times. I think the way you shift into a leadership mentality is you stop saying things like, there's nothing I can do, or, like, I don't want to take that risk, or I don't, kind of rejecting in yourself the idea that there's a price to pay if I step up and say something or do something. I think if we can break ourselves out of those mindsets, what we will find is that there's a lot of people who want to do things differently, who are ready to be followers of that vision. I think this idea of, can a leader become a follower, is an important one, because I think ultimately the best leaders are servants themselves. The best leaders are, in a sense, followers. They have their finger on the pulse of the community. They understand where the struggles are. They have an inherent empathy and understanding of those struggles. And their leadership comes from a place of that servant humility. And so, yeah, I think great leaders, there's a transition back and forth there that is very, very natural. And I would encourage people to, to follow their heart in that sense.
Great, thank you. So you have to expect a parking question to come.
Yeah, no,
up.
I knew it was coming.
So can you elaborate on those who constantly call for more parking spaces as being desperately needed to help downtowns versus not creating more parking? How do we show the economic benefit of less parking?
It's a really good question. I'm gonna point out. I'm gonna say three things about parking that hopefully will answer this question. The first one is, show me the most successful downtowns in the country. Show me the most successful places in the world, and I will show you places that have a lack of parking, a severe lack of parking. In terms of, the way we measure things. Show me places that are struggling, and I will show you places, or show me places with excess amounts of parking, and I will show you places that are struggling. There is no correlation. Now, let me say the second thing and build off of this. For small businesses in the downtown who don't own their own space, this is a strange abstraction, because the more successful a place becomes, the more people that are at a place, the more people that are there, the more expensive your rent becomes, the more expensive, basically everything comes. I don't know any small business owner in any city with any level of success that is saying, boy, I'm just rolling in it. Boy, things are easy. Boy, things are really nice. It is by its nature a tenuous situation. And whether you are, I get the reports out of downtown Disney, which is like some of the highest rents in the country, because you have massive amounts of people there spending money, copious amounts of money. The retailers are closing there in droves, and they're closing there in droves because the rent is really, really high. Not because they're not able to move product or what have you. It's because, it's a difficult operating environment. I can look at my core downtown here, and space is really cheap, but that's because there's not a lot of people coming in here. In both cases and everything in between, we hear the downtown business owners having the same struggles. I'm going to tell you that as someone who is not running a downtown business, but someone who advises cities and communities on it, this is not a struggle that we will alleviate, either through parking or either through something else. It is the nature of the business. So with that, I'm going to say that the third thing is that the places that I have seen have the most long-term success, and the places I have seen where they've had the most stable and most prosperous and most productive downtowns and downtown economic environments, is where that downtown is attached to, and not in a passive way, but in a very deep, embedded way, a surrounding neighborhood, where downtown is a museum piece that people drive to and park and go in like a museum piece. Those places are, even where they're successful, they tend to be stagnant. They tend to be not growing. They tend to be, just that museum piece. Where downtowns are kind of run out into the neighborhood, and the neighborhood runs into the downtown, and they're mixed together in this kind of traditional soup of a place. Those places experience dramatic upward type of progress continuously. There's a feedback loop. That doesn't mean it gets easier to run a business. That doesn't mean it gets less competitive. That doesn't mean that it becomes a place where it's just easy sailing for every downtown business owner. But what it does mean is that there's a positive feedback loop where the good things that happen in the downtown improve the neighborhood. Improvements in the neighborhood bring in more people, that improves the downtown, and the two work together in a way that really propels them both to greatness. That's what we want to get to. Parking is an impediment to that. And so as an overall strategy for community, I always say parking is a temporary use. It's a use that should go away over time as the land becomes more valuable and there's something else that you can do with it.
Great. Thank you. There are
That's a tough one.
Yeah. There were a couple more parking questions. So we'll jump down, and this might be a mostly Northeast / New Jersey unique concept. But can you explain the role varying governance structures, i.e. strong mayor, weak council, strong council, weak mayor, council, town manager, play in the success and self-sufficiency of downtowns?
Um, I am going to say none. And I realize there's a lot of theories on governance, like, well, if we have a strong town council, or if we have a strong mayor, if we have a city administrator, what I have found is that all these systems work well and all these systems fail. It really is mostly dependent on the people. No good system of government can overcome a bad community. If you have a community of negative people who won't, like, you can have great governance, they're not going to overcome negativity. They're not going to overcome a bad place. If you have a great place, if you have a place full of local leaders who want to see things done and want to see things happen and are willing to work together and humble themselves and be servants and work bottom up, work incrementally, I don't care if you have the worst government in the world. I don't care if you have a messed up city administrator or a public manager or what have you. You will fix those things. You will overcome those things. You will be able to take care of stuff. So I don't get too hung up on the system of government. I mean, we all have some democratic form of government. I'm not advocating for a monarchy or anything. But in the range of things that we see in the Northeast and across other parts of this country, I've seen them all work well and I've seen them all fail. I think the most important thing is, what is that community like? What are the people there like? How willing are they to work cooperatively together to see things get better?
Great. Thank you. I think we probably have room for maybe one more. What are 3 steps neighborhoods can take where there's been a long-term disinvestment to re-engage investment and create a trend of community engagement, improve collaboration with City Hall, area, small businesses, and the general public?
It's a very good question. Let me try to answer it succinctly with 3 specific examples. I think the first one is you really need to take your public engagement down to the block level. So many times when we are trying to engage communities like this, we say, well, let's do an opportunity zone, which I realize there have been places that benefit from opportunity zones, but in a neighborhood that is deeply struggling like this, an opportunity zone is merely outside capital and outside people coming in to try to make a tax shelter out of my neighborhood. And that's not the type of ownership structure that you need when you're trying to revive a place authentically, that includes that doesn't just displace the people there, that actually includes them. The second part is, I think from a investment standpoint, and this should be the public investment approach, but it can also be people just trying to work on things. We need to focus on where people struggle. We have a 4-step approach at Strong Towns to making these kind of investments. The first step is to observe with humility where people struggle. The second is to take the next smallest step possible to address that struggle. The third is to do that thing, do it over and over. And then the fourth is to repeat this process. It's an iterative process. Someone's having a difficult time getting across the street. How do we make that a little bit easier? Someone's having a difficult time opening a business here. How do we make that a little bit easier? If we can force ourselves to work at that scale, we can do a lot of things very, very quickly and create immense amount of momentum in struggling neighborhoods. The third one, I'm just going to reference you to a city called Oswego, New York, OSWEGO. They have a historic Renaissance association. They have a neighborhood that was struggling deeply. They went out and with private dollars, set up a system where they would match improvements that were made to the outside of properties. So if you look at a house, if you want to fix your heater or insulation, nope. But if you want to do something like repaint or fix a window or put on a new porch or put flowers in your yard, they would match that up to 50%. The trick was they required you to apply as a block, and you had to have at least 5 homes on the block participating at the same time. And so what would happen is it actually forced people out or encouraged people to go out and talk to each other about their hopes and dreams about the neighborhood in the future. What they found was that a lot of people liked the neighborhood. They wanted to be there, but they didn't have confidence in the place. They didn't have confidence that their neighbors felt the same. So once you got people out talking to each other, what you would see is that one block at a time, the neighborhood would just get better. And then it just created this cascade of great things. And this is an amazing neighborhood today, brought about by really tiny amounts of capital and lots of people talking to each other about their visions and hopes for the future.
That's a really cool story. Like that. And my sister who lives up there says it's pronounced Oswego. Not
yeah, I think you're right. I'm from Minnesota, so we like the A, Oswego.
Yeah.
Oswego. Yeah.
Yes. So that is our time. I want to thank you so much. That was such an informative and provocative conversation. Lots of chatter in the chat. We're really appreciative. And those of you, this was recorded. We'll get it posted up in the next 24 hours. I do want to again thank Commercial District Services for both being the sponsor of the session, but Chris Bernardo also hooked us up with Charles and made this happen. So he went the extra step. So I want to thank everybody who attended, and I encourage you to join the virtual exhibit hall and networking that begins in about 5 minutes. I put the link in the chat, and also to join the session at, I believe, 1:30 on economic recovery. So please join us in the afternoon. And with that, I'm going to end this webinar. Thank you so much, Chuck.
Thank you. Really look forward to seeing you all again soon, I hope.
Great. Thank you.